Hi, this is Professor Doyle Young. It's good to be with you again. At this point, you hopefully have listened to the opening remarks that I made about leadership. And I followed it up with a lecture on change leadership, which was just completed for you. This particular lecture is on chapter 1 of our book, okay? But before getting into chapter 1 of our book, I want to talk to you about, to reiterate the purpose of the lecture and the text that you have in this class. The purpose overall is to develop effectiveness in leadership situations by understanding the complex challenges involved in leadership. And so we believe that the lecture and the book, the text, if you will serve as a guide for interpreting leadership theory and for research. The book aims to provide both a theoretical and practical advice on how to be a better leader. We understand that there have been great leaders all over our societies all over the world, and so our attempt through the lectures is to bring to life the various, all the research, the major research, and the information to us on terms of the qualities and characteristics of leaders. The process by which an agent induces, or a leader induces a subordinate to behave in a desired manner is one definition of leadership. Another one might be is the directing and coordinating the work of a group of members in an organization. As we talked about earlier, we live in a relational universe, and there are interpersonal relationships with the leaders and subordinates and others who need to, in terms of subordinates, comply with, because they want to as subordinates, not because they have to in organizations. So in that regard, leadership is a relational challenge in how we get a group of individuals to go along with the leader. So in that regard, leadership is a process of influencing an organized group towards accomplishing its goals. And as we were talked about in the previous lecture, it's very execution-oriented, or very actionable actions that focus on resources to create desired opportunities. We also talked earlier about a definition of leadership, which is the leader's job is to create conditions for the team to be effective. And we always, in terms of our leadership, looked at the ends of leadership, which is to get results through other people. And so that means that leadership's involve the ability to build a cohesive, goal-oriented team. So team leadership, developing of teams, is frankly one of the most critical, if you will, performance outcomes of true leadership, is to build a group of people or a set of teams, sets of teams throughout the organization. So good leaders are those who build teams to get results across a variety of situations. So leadership really represents a complex form of social problem solving for leaders. Next thing is this chapter 1, if you will, is emphasized is leadership is both a science and an art. Some managers may be effective leaders without ever having taken a course or training program in leadership. Some scholars, even within the field of leadership, may be relatively poor leaders themselves. We believe that leadership will always remain partly an art, is partly a science. There's an old saying by General Willard W. Scott: any fool can keep a rule. God gave him a brain to know when to break the rule. So not only is leadership an art and a science, but leadership is also rational and emotional. And leadership includes actions and influences based on reason and logic, as well as those based on inspiration and passion. So since people are both rational and emotional, leaders can use rational techniques or emotional appeals to individuals. as part of the fact that leaders, of course, we're all human beings, and we all have feelings, and those aroused feelings can be used either positively or negatively, constructively or destructively. The mere presence of a group can cause people to act differently than when they are alone. So leaders need to consider both the rational and emotional consequences of their actions. One important area to talk about within the area of leadership is the comparison, if you will, between leadership and management. And so what I'd like to do is spend a few minutes just talking about those. That's again in your book, but you know, to characterize the fact that management is primarily seen as administrative in origin. That is, taking a very much of a day-to-day, not that leaders don't, but more of a day-to-day hands-on administration, operational focus to maintain and control, put controls in place for the organization. I like to think of managers who typically take an operational view, which I define operations as anything that goes on in the organization in a year, not anything strategically that goes beyond a year. So where managers, it says in the book, ask how and when, leaders ask what and why. Managers imitate, leaders originate, managers accept the status quo, and leaders really challenge it. If you know, based on the earlier lecture on change, you might say that leaders really are about creating the organization's capacity for change. They innovate, they inspire, they develop, and they take, again, a strategic or long-term view. Leadership is about social influence and processes. So, you know, this whole characterization of leadership overall in this text has been that leadership is not about a person, it's more about a process that's in place within an organization. It's a social influence process which the leader communicates and impacts and deals with a complex set, organizations under great complexity. So although indistinguishable in an organization, leadership and followership are not the same thing, okay? It also needs to be said that whether organizations are large and small, not all leaders are powerful or famous. Most leaders are not known outside their own particular sphere or activity, nor should they be. You know, even though we hear a lot about leaders worldwide, for example, with elected officials, politicians, prime ministers, presidents, or the captains of industry, you know, presidents, CEOs, and so forth. We hear a lot about them, but having said that, every one of us has the opportunity to be a leader within their own organizations. I truly believe that there are different kinds of leaders. Some leaders, as we're going to talk about this further in the semesters, are not necessarily in a position that you would know they're leaders, but they certainly have leadership influence, okay? Now there are some myths about leaders, and I just want to go through a few of those. There's a myth that good leadership is all about common sense. Most leadership literature will only confirm what everyone with common sense already knows. However, common sense is an ambiguous term, and we really don't understand what that means. One challenge of leadership is to know when common sense applies and when it does not. You know, if leadership was nothing more than common sense, the problems in the workplace would be few, if any. So leadership is really about more than common sense. Next myth is leaders are born, not made. There are certainly people, you and I, come wired at the beginning because of heredity and genetics, and there are what we call innate factors. These are innate factors. But there's also formative experience that influence many sorts of behavior, including leadership. So the research indicates that many cognitive abilities and personality traits are at least partially innate. That is, mental abilities and personalities are already sort of, the person is born with these. Our basic natures may be fixed through heredity and so forth, but different environments can nurture or suppress different leadership qualities. So we're back to my earlier comments in the previous lectures that the environment that we build in organizations is particularly important. Let me put it this way. Great leaders develop other leaders. Okay? So developing leadership in organizations is a absolute committed, dedicated activity by the leader to raise up through succession planning, through a planned approach, if you will, about where these leaders are coming from and what they're going to be doing. So, in this myth about leaders are born, not made, the real comment here is that leaders are born and made. Okay. The next myth is that the only school you learn leadership is from the school of hard knocks. Being able to analyze your experiences from multiple perspectives may be the single greatest contribution a formal course in leadership can give you. What I have found in my own studies and commitment to lifelong learning, both as a student, as a professor, as a person that's applied this in leadership roles myself, is that the commitment to education and learning shortens my cycle for learning by bringing me, giving me the knowledge I need to move into constructive behaviors. Okay. So let's move on a little bit more into part one. An overview of the book, as we've said before, is an interaction between leaders and followers. Leadership develops through experience, and leadership can be assessed and studied. We've talked about this earlier, that the focus of the leader and the issues of power and influence and ethics and values are particularly important. And the theories and research concerning leaders, how good and bad leaders differ in personality, intelligence, creativity, and behavior. We're really talking at another level about charismatic leadership. Those people that we would characterize as charismatic are able to influence large groups of people. And many times those charismatic leaders are identified bottom up in organizations as leaders and put in their positions. And I think of some great leaders that have been that way throughout history. In India and so forth, that have come up through the people and have been raised up, see. So let's, if we can, get into talking a little bit more about the sections of the book. We talked, there are 13 sections. Section 1, chapter 1 we just went over, with just a generic overview of leadership. We talked about that. But you're going to find that the other sections will get into a lot more detail about the roles and responsibilities of leaders and how they perform. So good luck in the rest of your class, and I look forward to meeting you further in the video series.